This day in history in 5 minutes or less. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of This Day in History in 5 minutes or less. We are focusing today on June 5th, 1981. What happened on this day is the CDC put out a report that 5 people in LA have a rare form of pneumonia seen only in patients with a weakened immune system, in what turns out to be the first recognized cases of AIDS. So I am joined today by a very special guest, Bradley Wester. Bradley is a writer, an artist, professor, and cultural activist. Bradley, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Super excited to be here and to see you again, Danielle.
I say our, and it's literally me and the mice in my pocket. But that's okay. Bradley, you have some amazing essays from the '80s in New York, and you have some just amazing experiences in the queer community that you really dive into, not only in your visual artwork, but also in your essays and even what bleeds into your nonfiction reviews of things. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this today, but let's go back to the '80s for just a minute. There was obviously a huge stigma around AIDS in the '80s, and there were a lot of biases towards the queer community. Are there anything that really stands out to you about living through that time and with your friends and your colleagues?
I guess the first thing that stands out is that I survived it, when so many people died. So that was pretty traumatic. For me, I came to New York, as you know, from the deep South, New Orleans, to be a famous artist. And I came here for grad school, came there. I'm now in Rhode Island, but I came there in '78. So this was supposed to be the period of me like coming out and having a lot of sex and, like enjoying a city and an urban environment where I could actually be who I was, for the first time ever. And within a few short years, uh, this AIDS was announced, in 1982, right? And we were also dealing with, was it 82 or 81, did you say?
So 81 is when
81,
the first cases were reported, and
right.
it wasn't even called AIDS, I don't believe, until later because
Yeah,
they called
right.
it SARS or something like
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
first. And
Yeah, so we were terrified, and it was, I guess it was '82 when Reagan was elected, right? So we also were dealing with Reagan, who never said the word AIDS. The New York Times never printed the words AIDS uh, in their paper, and so it was a huge stigmatization for queer people because it was the gay disease, right?
mhm.
But of course, it really wasn't. But in these queer communities in major urban environments, there was a lot of sexing going on, and there were a lot of immune systems that were compromised because of so many STDs and so
Mhm.
much tetracycline being given. Like we were just vulnerable, and we were the
Yeah.
first to get hit. So yeah, there were periods when, I mean, I read that people were calling for rounding us up and putting us in concentration camps. So that didn't happen. Ironically, um, after ACT UP and all the activism that happened during the '80s, that was incredibly dynamic and exciting in many ways, and really did affect change, huge change in the medical industry. Um, what happened was that people died all over the world, people that were gay, and almost everyone knew someone who died of AIDS, and it was either a brother, a lover, a cousin,
Mhm.
right? A movie star, Rock Hudson. So what it did was, in this really weird flip of disastrous kind of scenario, it actually humanized us to everybody. And in the end, I think it worked towards the progress that was made, in the LGBTQ activist arena.
There's certainly been a ton of progress. I mean, even when, I'm on different streaming platforms and commercials pop up because I refuse to pay more than they already gouge out of me. Um, you'll see advertisements for medication, for, AIDS medication, to promoting a healthy lifestyle and things like that. So there's obviously been a huge cultural shift, but do you feel like the stigmas are still there? Do you feel like the biases at a surface level at least are still present?
It's interesting, you're talking about like corporations, like drug companies, for example, advertising to us. This is Pride Month.
Hmm.
I'm recalling Pride Day or weekend, in the early 80s.
Yeah.
That's when it was an activist, action to be in a Pride March. It was actually something that took some courage,
Yeah.
right? I broke up with a boyfriend because he wouldn't march in that
Yeah.
parade. Um, you took a risk being seen and being outed, in these parades. In those days, it was definitely political activism in those days. Today, it's a celebration, and that's a good thing. There's this wonderful celebration about it. But you see all these. It's also an opportunity for all these corporations to advertise to us for the gay dollar.